leaders and market movers. This is The Pulse with Francine Lacqua.
Welcome to The Pulse. I'm Francine Lacqua here live from Davos. Join us all week for our exclusive interviews with some of the world's biggest power brokers. So here's what's coming up on today's program, day one. The World Economic Forum kicks off here in Davos. Global leaders from the worlds of business and politics gather to grapple with some of the globe's biggest challenges: conflict, climate, and the impact of artificial intelligence. President Zelensky is said to be planning to meet with JP Morgan Chief Executive Jamie Dimon here in Davos as Ukraine seeks aid to rebuild, with calls for help being eclipsed by the Middle East conflict. And in the U.S., lawmakers unveil a stopgap spending bill aimed at averting a partial government shutdown later this month. Meanwhile, the first official contest of the 2024 election takes place tonight. We'll discuss that with some of our big guests here from Davos. Also coming up, we'll be joined by the former U.S. Vice President Al Gore, Coinbase CFO Alesia Haas, and the Chief Executive and founder of the WOW Foundation, Jude Kelly. But in a moment, we'll be speaking to the BlackRock Vice Chair, Philipp Hildebrand. Now, we're also just getting some breaking news out of German GDP. Now, this is an incredibly important number, not only for the ECB, but because of the concerns that we've had over the German economy over the last couple of months, it gives us a good indication of what we could expect for the whole of the Eurozone. Now, German economy contracting some 0.3% in 2023. That's pretty much as expected. Again, if we actually do the breakdown, we'll be able to see exactly what's done better than expected and what's done worse. Now, farmers, of course, entering the second week of protests also in Germany against diesel subsidy cuts. The nationwide disruption is piling misery on the Chancellor Olaf Scholz coalition as it struggles to fix this budget mess. So let's go straight to Bloomberg's Oliver Crook, who's in Berlin. So, Ollie, break down the GDP numbers for us.
Yeah, that's right, Francine. And this is really the culmination of those protests we've been seeing for about 8 days now. And today is the day when all of the farmers from across Germany have descended upon Berlin in order to put themselves right in front of the Bundestag, right in front of Chancellor Scholz, to express their displeasure about some of the actions that had to be taken about the budget cuts. And this is really a story that went from the sort of abstract last year when we were talking about plugging that budget hole into the reality of what that means and what it means for certain industries. By the same token with the economy. Right, we're talking about a contraction of 0.3%, the only major economy like Germany to have contracted last year. The question is, what does it look like going forward? I mean, we've had 6 months in Germany of industrial contraction. And again, going from the theoretical, the abstract, we've talked about the energy crisis, we've talked about the labor shortage, we've talked about all of these stories in Germany. This is really where the rubber hits the road and we start to see the economy weakening. And what is in hold for this year? We're expecting a slight growth this year, but if you ask Deutsche Bank and Commerzbank, it's going to be more contraction, and that is going to continuously pile up more pressure on this government, where there is the lowest approval rating for a chancellor since 1997 in Olaf Scholz, when the records began. So really a very tense moment for Germany, and the political consequences will be vast.
All right, Ollie, thank you so much. Oliver Crook there in Berlin. Now, last week, BlackRock became one of the world's biggest infrastructure investors after it also announced an agreement to buy global infrastructure partners for about $12.5 billion. I'm very pleased to be joined by BlackRock's Vice Chair, Philipp Hildebrand. Philipp, thank you so much for joining us. There's so much going on in the space of central banks. It's pretty incredible, actually, that the world has been so resilient despite the huge monetary adjustment, unwinding 15 years of monetary loosening. Are you optimistic about 2024?
Well, I think that you're right. The past has been really, the last year has been a story of pandemic savings that have been run down by consumers, so very strong consumption. And then we should not forget government spending has increased dramatically, particularly in the U.S. And so you've seen these two forces that have kind of been a countervailing force to the contraction that we've seen in capital markets through tighter interest rates. Probably most people have been surprised. The question now is, how much longer can this go? How much longer can you have government spending the way we've seen it? How much longer can you run down these pandemic savings? And that's going to be the story, I think, of this year. In a sense, it's the final normalization of the post-pandemic adjustment.
So what does that mean you're watching out for this year? Again, we started last year thinking that we could see a huge recession in the U.S. We were worried about corporate default, and we haven't seen any of that.
That's right. I think the story in the next few months is going to be goods inflation is going to continue to drop quite rapidly. We have now negative numbers, and that basically brings down the overall inflation numbers quite dramatically, and as a result the markets have now priced in what I think is probably excessive interest rate cuts in the US. But that's going to run out at some point. This is the final leg of the post-pandemic adjustment. So by year end, I would say we're going to be done with that, and then goods inflation is no longer going to drop. No. Service inflation, wage inflation is still very high. And so I think the story is going to be, at some point we're going to realize that it's not that easy to kind of stabilize the 2% inflation target that central banks are looking for. And so some of the optimism in rates right now, in the U.S. in particular, is probably overdone.
But so what worst case scenario, we don't have as many cuts as are being priced in, and also that would be during a slowing down of the economy, or are you seeing the jobs market to be pretty much resilient?
I think the wages, services looks resilient at the moment. Goods inflation is going to continue to come down. There is going to be weakness in the economy. There's no question about that. But I think what central banks will find, particularly in the U.S., that they won't have as much room to cut as is currently priced in. I mean, we're sort of priced for perfection right now. And, there's going to be some readjustment to that. Less so in Europe. I think in Europe the story is, in a sense, clearer than it is in the U.S.
Philipp, infrastructure, so what's the thinking behind that?
Well, look, first of all, I think Larry always says culture matters most. So this brings together, I think, two firms, two partners, two leaders that have known each other for 4 decades, and a cultural fit. Infrastructure, we believe, is the big story in private markets in the next 10, 20 years. These are long-term trends. We know that we need to upgrade infrastructure across the world. It also is a perfect fit. We have very little overlap in our existing infrastructure business and the GIP business. And then finally, I think the transition as one of the infrastructure stories is also an interesting piece here where, again, there is a lot of synergy between what we have done and what GIP has done in the past. And it brings us to scale at infrastructure. We're now going to be one of the big infrastructure players worldwide. So it's very, very exciting.
Phil, where do you see the most opportunities, I guess, for business or business deals? Is it going to be where there's growth, and is that the U.S. market compared, for example, to the Asian market? Or do you also see potential opportunities in Europe?
I think the global infrastructure story, and it really is a global story for many reasons, right? We have outdated infrastructure think of the UK, think of the US, massive need for infrastructure spending. We have the entire transition story, the energy transition story. You'll hear more about that later on today, I'm sure. That's going to require trillions of investments, and we have stretched governments. I think this is one of the key stories that also underpins this transaction that Larry and Bio announced last week, that you have very much stretched governments. So public-private partnerships, particularly in these vast infrastructure projects, are going to be a very big story. And this is something where we want to be part of it. And so I think that's a great opportunity both in Europe and in the US as well as in Asia, frankly.
But so away from infrastructure, maybe a little bit, is there something that you worry that's not being priced in correctly in the markets?
Well, at the moment, I think, if anything, I'm a little worried that we're sort of priced for near perfection, a sort of almost perfect soft landing, where inflation, is gone as a problem, where maybe central banks could even cut in the face of any kind of potential weakness. I'm certain that what we're going to find is that inflation has become stickier than we think, or than the market thinks right now, for various reasons. We have lower growth, we have very high government spending, we have a fractured, geopolitical system. So all this basically raises cost. And what we're going to find as inflation drops now, mostly driven by goods prices, by the end of the year, we're going to realize that it doesn't settle easily at 2%, let alone at something less so that you cut rates. But I think, more likely we're going to settle probably slightly above 2%, which means central banks are going to have to stay on alert.
So do you worry about the cost of money, actually the cost of credits? And this could be because of what we've seen in the last 18 months, but actually could be also much more structural reasons.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think one of the stories of the last decade really is a lot of investments have been done by way of financial engineering. And in some ways, we're going to have to get back. This is another reason why we prefer infrastructure over private equity. We're going to have to get back to kind of long-term macro trends, and realize that financial engineering, when interest rates are higher than they have been for decades, when growth is lower, when government spending is going to be constrained, financial engineering-driven investments are going to be much, much harder to find. And so I think in some ways it's a healthy correction towards, in a sense, kind of returning to investing really on fundamentals, as opposed to a lot of leveraged debt and financial engineering.
Thank you so much. The BlackRock Vice Chair, Philipp Hildebrand, stays with us. We'll talk a little bit more also about geopolitics and, of course, how markets should look at that. More from Davos, day one. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back, everyone, to the World Economic Forum here in Davos, where the BlackRock Vice Chairman, Philipp Hildebrand, is still with me. Philipp, thank you for sticking around. I mean, we're kind of freezing you here, so I don't know where else you'd go.
It's great to be here. Look at this backdrop,
but it
right?
is a good view. We freeze you, but give you a good view.
As a Swiss, this is what you want to see.
I know, it feels like an advertisement for Switzerland. When you look at some of the concern across the globe, how difficult actually could it be for Switzerland, kind of, getting out of all the bank debacle, but also attracting global investment?
I think we have a current account surplus, so there's no issue of capital coming in. In a sense, the banking story is an adjustment. It's a tragedy, should have never happened, but it is what it is. And I think the key now, the focus in politics will be how do you make sure that you have a bank that is this large relative to the country's economic and financial capability. How do you manage it from a risk management perspective in a sense that you don't ever have to get back to a kind of situation that we had with Credit Suisse. So that will be the focal point, I think, of any regulatory reform.
Phil, when you talk about risks, I mean, it's pretty incredible to think, of what's happening in the Middle East and the fact that the market has barely taken notice. Maybe there's a bit of move on the oil price, but there's attacks, there are drones, there's Houthis, there's Yemen, there's Ukraine. We also don't know who becomes the next president of the United States. Like, how do you deal with all of these unknowns?
It's hard. I think the overall story is that we've moved towards a much more fragmented geopolitical system, therefore a much more fragmented global economy that is organized in a sense in blocks. That means a loss of efficiency, that means higher cost, and probably means on balance a lower potential growth rate for the global economy. Now, the focus has to be on maintaining the conflicts and where possible to try to solve them or stabilize them. In a sense, the good news is that a lot of these things are man-made. Demographics, there's not much we can do about it. That lowers potential growth. Fragmentation, in a sense, we can address. We could find a way to stabilize the situation in the Middle East. We could find a way to ultimately move towards some sort of ceasefire discussion in Ukraine. And we can, we could stabilize relations between the U.S. and China. So a lot of this, in a sense, has been man-made in recent years. It's a problem. It weighs on markets. It weighs on the global economy. And hopefully discussions like this can be a contribution towards lessening these tensions and moving back towards something that is a little less fragmented than what we currently have.
Is that likely?
Well, it's, I suppose at some level, the simple answer would be not really when you look at the current state of play. On the other hand, the cost of this fragmented system over time, I think, is going to drive political leaders and political system towards trying to address those things that we can address. Some things we can't. Demographics, there's not much we can do about it. We can hope that perhaps productivity can be boosted, whether it's through AI or other means to make up for some of it, but there's not much we can do about it. On the fragmented state of the global economy, in principle, these are things that can be addressed through good policy making.
What does a second-term President Trump mean for the world economy?
Well, this is Christine Lagarde talked about it the other day. I think you're going to see her later on today. Certainly from a European perspective, from a kind of globalist Atlanticist perspective, it's of course a great concern. We've been there before, we've survived it, so we'll see what it means. I think the question overall will be, does it lead to even more fragmentation in the global economy? And, if that's the case, the cost of that will become quite apparent.
Who are you most worried about? I mean, is it the U.S. economy because of a division, or is it how Europe would deal with President Trump?
I think that the overall the big story in Europe is how does Europe find a sort of President Macron has referred to this as European sovereignty. How do we find our own place in this system with less dependency on the U.S., less dependency on China in the space of digitalization, in the space of finance, frankly, and in the space of security. And security, of course, is the one place where the dependency, in a sense, is most pronounced. So I think Europe has if it wants to be an independent power, in a sense, it has decades of very hard work ahead of itself to find this sovereign space, in a sense, in this fragmented world.
Philipp, thank you so much for joining us today. Philipp Hildebrand, the Vice Chair at BlackRock, really getting us started for the week here in Davos. Now, coming up, we'll be talking to a pioneer of gender equality, Jude Kelly. She's the founder of the WOW Foundation, a charity dedicated to confronting gender inequality around the world. That's a key conversation next. And this is Bloomberg. And then a little bit later, we'll also be speaking to the former U.S. Vice President, Al Gore, getting his reaction to the news that John Kerry is stepping down as America's top climate envoy. Stay with us. Well, the fight for gender equality in business and finance is continuing in its goal for change. Female chief executives remain a small minority, while differences in pay and career progressions are still being called into question. Well, one of the voices leading the gender equality movement in business is Jude Kelly, Chief Executive Officer and founder of the WOW Foundation, and she joins me now. Jude, thank you so much for joining us. There's so much going on, and we're not making real progress. If you look at the number of women and the gender pay gap in full-time positions, it's actually gotten worse in 2023. Why?
Well, I think COVID had a lot to do with it. I think that also people shift focus. So, the hot ticket at the moment is climate change, which, of course, it should be. But I think that the whole realization is that unless you are going to bring women's potential full on, full force to everything that the magnitude of humanity has to deal with, then we're really missing a trick. And I think it's going backwards as well because, the issue about paternity involvement, childcare, it hasn't really shifted either. The issue around violence against women hasn't really shifted. So, I personally, my reason for being in Davos and the talk I'm going to give is about fathers and daughters and men's involvement. You can't wait for women to do all the fighting to catch up. And, when you're talking about gender equality in terms of pay, it's not just female financial worth. It's also the jeopardy you put women in when they're largely responsible for family if you don't give them equality of opportunity and pay.
We're also seeing MPs in the UK looking at sexism in the city, in the financial district.
Yeah.
Like, why are we still talking about this in 2024?
I was going to say, this sort of was old news that went with pinstripes and red braces, didn't it? But obviously, sadly not. And it's a terrible thing to see the attrition of brilliant women who are just bailing out and saying it's not a place that I want to work in because it doesn't speak of the values that it pretends to have. It's really serious. It's got to be attended to. And I think, the Me Too movement sort of came, people kind of went, well, it's a bit too much, isn't it, girls? And then a lot of hostility. Look, this is not about not loving men. We all love men. Actually, this is about behaviour being endemic and having to be changed. And, the city cannot carry on like this. I
mean, where are we making progress? Again, if you speak to a lot of top chief executives, they say it doesn't really, I want the best females because it's 50% of the population, sure. And otherwise my pool of talent gets reduced.
Yeah, but the thing is that there are brilliant chief executives, of course, and there are brilliant people running HR departments, mainly women, D&I, but it's actually what you're really saying in between all of those spaces, where you're saying to people, just cut through, we want the bottom line dealt with, I don't care how you get there. And at the same time, you sort of have this idea that kind of macho ranging around is the attitude you want to keep. We can't even at work begin to talk really about the number of stresses and jobs that women do separate from their actual job. So, long conversation, I'm still optimistic.
But it is changing at the margins, is it? Like the fact that leadership now is more about nurturing, is more about bringing your talent and your team with you.
Yeah, I do think so. I think that the nature of leadership has been called into question. We're no longer command and control. That's kind of out of the window to a large extent, certainly in certain economies. But I think that it's a long way before a lot of men have the experience of, if you like, the number of things that women deal with. And because you don't want to be a moaner, a lot of women actually keep stum, you know, because they feel if they keep calling it out, even on behalf of other people, that somehow I'm going to be seen as a troublemaker. So this silencing around the microaggressions, not even the big problems, that's still a problem too. So, you know, it's women have to be braver, although it costs them sometimes. But the biggest issue is that men have got to be better allies. And why wouldn't they be? You know, why wouldn't they be? After all, their brothers and their sons and their dads and their uncles. And, you know, I like men, like climate change. Don't leave it to the climate activists to sort it all out. We're all involved. Don't leave it to women to sort out equal pay and sexism generally. We're all involved.
Jude, thanks so much. And the speech that you're giving on fathers and daughters will be extremely powerful. Your first Davos, actually.
It is my first
So
Davos,
you'll have to come back to tell us what you think. Jude Kelly, the chief executive and founder there of the WOW Foundation. Now, coming up, we'll be joined by the former U.S. Vice President, Al Gore. We'll have a conversation, of course, on climate change, but we'll also have a conversation on the U.S., where it's going politically, and maybe we'll touch on his biggest fears. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg. The World Economic Forum kicks off here in Davos. Day one, global leaders from the worlds of business and politics gather to grapple with some of the globe's biggest challenges: conflict, climate, and of course the impact of artificial intelligence. Now, President Zelensky is said to be planning to meet with the JP Morgan chief executive, Jamie Dimon, here in Davos as Ukraine seeks aid to rebuild, with calls for help being eclipsed by the Middle East conflict. And in the U.S., lawmakers unveil a stopgap spending bill aimed at averting a partial government shutdown later this month. Meanwhile, the first official contest of the 2024 election takes place tonight. We'll discuss that with some of our biggest names in Davos. Well, good morning again, everyone, and welcome to our special coverage from Davos. I'm Francine Lacqua. Now, over the weekend, John Kerry said he's planning to step down as a U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Change. The former Secretary of State has spent 3 years relentlessly pushing for more aggressive global action against rising temperatures. His efforts have been described as heroic by the former U.S. Vice President Al Gore, who joins me now here in Davos. Vice President Gore, thank you for joining us.
Of course.
There's a lot going on. I don't know when we look at the policies surrounding climate change, whether it's slipped down because of conflicts in the Middle East, because of conflicts in Ukraine, and what you're expecting here in Davos.
Well, I think there's going to be a lot of fruitful discussion about climate here. I hope we can make some further progress. So, you know, the conference in Dubai, where you did such great coverage, ended with an agreement to phase out fossil fuels. Some of those who signed up to that pledge are now trying to claim it was optional and trying to walk it back a little bit. But it's an important commitment that must be kept. As for your question, will it fall down the agenda? I don't think so. Mother Nature has other intentions. Unfortunately, the climate-related extreme weather events, they're underway right now, today, every day. And we're continuing to add a huge additional amount of heat-trapping pollution to the sky every single day. The good news is that once we get to true net zero and stop adding, the temperatures will stop going up almost immediately with a lag of as little as 3 years. And if we stay at true net zero, half of the human-caused greenhouse gas pollution will fall out of the atmosphere in as little as 25 to 30 years. But getting there is getting there is very tough. It's a big if, but it's not an impossible if, because we now have better technologies that are cheaper in almost the entire world without pollution. Decades ago, one of the Saudi energy ministers famously said to his king, "We better remember that the Stone Age didn't end because of a shortage of stones. It ended because something better came along." Well, something better has come along to replace fossil fuels, but the power of the fossil fuel industry and the petrostates that depend on that revenue has been a major obstacle blocking progress. Little by little, that's beginning to give way. And I want to thank my friend John Kerry for his terrific service to the U.S. And I think people around the world owe him a debt of gratitude for his tireless work.
What does John Kerry stepping down mean for efforts on climate change?
Well, he'll be hard to replace because he brought the stature to have the kinds of meetings that a climate envoy needs to have. And of course, he shouldn't be judged just by the final result in Dubai. He's been there for several COPs. And, you know, in the Summer Olympics, when they judge the diving competition, the degree of difficulty has a great deal to do with the final score. And he undertook a tremendously difficult task and really did a terrific job, in my opinion.
Vice President, you've called for the way that COP works to change.
Yeah.
Will it? Are people listening?
I think they are. It's difficult to change it, but I think the time has come. Because, for one thing, look, this is the second year in a row we're going to have a petro-state hosting the COP with an oil and gas veteran as the president of the COP. Come on. I mean, really? And the percentage of revenue coming from oil and gas in Azerbaijan, the host of this year's COP, is even larger than what it was in the United Arab Emirates. And it's not that they're bad people or have bad intentions. They just have a structural conflict of interest. Also, there is another problem. When the UN selects different regions, they rotate through regions of the world, as you know. And any nation within that region has a veto power over where the COP can be held. So Russia, in this instance, said, no, you can't have it in any country that has sane policies. My editorial ad there, any NATO country, etc. And so it ended up in one of the ancient homes of the petroleum industry again. I personally believe that the Secretary General should have joint authority with the host nation to name the president of the COP. Secretary General Guterres does not want that authority, and I understand that, but I think the time has come to reform this process. The world is getting understandably impatient and frustrated that these conferences are rigged. They're rigged. The deck is stacked in favor of the fossil fuel industry.
But we did have agreements. So again, how do you match the two?
Such as they are. There's so many loopholes and so many tricky phrases. And it took 28 COPs, 28 years of COPs before we even could use the phrase fossil fuels. The climate crisis is a fossil fuel crisis. That's what it is. And yet it's taken us this long to overcome their resistance and even naming the problem.
What happens to climate change pledges from the U.S. if President Trump has a second term?
Well, first of all, let me say that I think that in spite of the loopholes I mentioned in this agreement, and in spite of the frustration many of the climate advocates, such as I, have felt about it, nevertheless, we see the direction of travel, as they use that phrase, for both business and government, shifting inexorably toward low carbon, renewable energy, and toward net zero. We see the same thing here at the World Economic Forum. This place is sometimes criticized. It's unique in bringing all kinds of people together in a way that doesn't happen anywhere else. And your question was,
if President Trump gets into the White House, what does that mean for climate change?
I, of course, hope that doesn't happen. There are many of my fellow Americans who are for him. You know, look at the last time when he became president, we continued the march toward renewable energy.
On the business side.
On the business side, and state governments continued to pursue carbon reduction. Here in Davos, a Republican red state governor from Georgia is leading off talking about the virtues of electric vehicles. We are seeing with the legislation that President Biden got passed, the Inflation Reduction Act, as it's called, the biggest climate legislation any nation's ever passed in history. We're seeing a change in the political realities on the ground in the U.S. with the creation of tens of thousands of new jobs in electric vehicles, batteries, wind, solar, efficiency, green hydrogen. And now some of these red states in particular, they're now seeing the benefits of all these new jobs being created. It's really changing the reality.
Do you think Donald Trump won't try and touch that?
I wouldn't even begin to predict what goes on in his calculations. And of course, tonight we will see the results of the first contest, which all the pundits tell us he's likely to win. But in New Hampshire, it could be a different story. I'm not a political pundit myself, so I won't opine on that. But I don't think, even were he to be elected, and I know that kind of looms over many people's calculations these days, even if he were to win, I think we would see a continuation of this progress toward zero carbon.
I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about that. I think you are a political pundit, maybe, you know, just as many as the others.
I don't claim to be.
Al Gore is staying with us here at Davos to discuss also this year's U.S. presidential election. That's coming up next, and this is Bloomberg. Now, voters in Iowa have been urged to defy extreme cold weather and make their voices heard. The First Republic presidential caucuses are taking place in the state, with Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, and Ron DeSantis battling it out for the Republican nomination for the White House. Now, the former U.S. Vice President Al Gore is still with me. I mean, Iowa is huge. It's actually one of the years where it also matters the most. Do you think President Trump will have a second term?
I don't know. I really and truly don't know. I know that many people feel it's moving in that direction. I'm not so sure myself. And where the Iowa Republican caucuses are concerned, I'm not sure they're as significant as some believe, because there have been so many examples. Well, last time in 2016, Ted Cruz won the Iowa caucuses going away, and then it mattered not a whit. We've seen others win the Iowa caucus on the Republican side and then disappear. On the Republican side of the fence in Iowa, that state has become far more conservative than any other Midwestern state. And I think the Republican side of Iowa is a little bit out of touch with the rest of the country now. New Hampshire next week, independents are able to vote. It'll be a truer test of what's really going on.
But it feels like across the board that Donald Trump is so far ahead in the polls compared to, is it a given that he has a nomination for the Republican Party, or you don't think so?
Well, I don't want to think so, so you have to take that into account when you hear my answer. But I don't think that it's a foregone conclusion. I know my view in that respect is at odds with what most of the professional political pundits say, and I claim no expertise on that. I've been through the process. I've run 4 national campaigns, and I've seen it from that perspective, and I've seen a lot of surprises over the years. And something tells me this may be a year of significant surprises. Again, I hope it's the case, because I don't want to see him renominated and reelected. Is
there anything that the Biden camp can do to convince voters that he's the right man for the job? Again, if you look at legislation, if you look at what he's passed through, he should be polling much higher.
Yeah, that's right. And it may be that there is a little bit of a lag in voters' perceptions of how the economy has improved, and particularly in how inflation has come way back down. And it may be that 10, 11 months from now, we may see a significant shift in his favor. I've learned over the years that, in my opinion, the presidency is a team sport, and I think that his team is as good as any that has ever occupied the executive branch in the U.S. And if you look at his management of the economy, his management of foreign policy, his management of a whole number of issues, it's really producing results that over time I think will change the way he's perceived in the current polls. But we shall see, because time will tell.
Could he change the ticket and run with someone else?
Well, listening to what he has said about that, I would say that he has no intention of doing that.
Vice President, when you look at when Americans go to the polls and are in the booth and vote, what do they vote on? Does climate change factor in what they want, or is it purely on the economy?
Increasingly, climate is a voting issue, and a top voting issue for a growing number, particularly young people. The latest polling in the U.S. shows that more than 60% of the American people make it a top priority issue. And young people, oh my gosh, there's a real generational divide. Even among young Republicans, almost 2/3 of young Republicans are really eager to change their party's position. And as these extreme weather events continue to remind us that this is suicidal, what we're doing, it's crazy to keep going like this. And we've had so many multi-billion-dollar events and it's the developing countries that are hurt the most. Right. And continuing to burn these fossil fuels also kills almost 9 million people a year just from the co-pollution of the air pollution. We're seeing the sea level rise. Even today, there are all these images of homes being washed into the sea. I mean, this is making it a voting issue for many people. It is also an economic issue because it creates 3 times as many jobs per dollar invested in the sustainability economy than the old dirty fossil fuel economy.
But in the booth, Vice President, what do people actually think about to put?
Traditionally, the economy is the number one driving issue. But what I'm saying to you in response, and I genuinely, deeply believe this, increasingly climate is coming into their calculations. Not for the majority of voters yet, but it is a very important issue.
Very good. Thank you so much. The former U.S. Vice President there, Al Gore, with a hopeful message, actually, of where climate change sits on the thinking of Americans. Coming up, we'll be joined by Alesia Haas, the Chief Financial Officer at Coinbase. We'll discuss last week's approval of Bitcoin ETFs and what it means for the future of crypto. That's next, live from Davos, and this is Bloomberg. Bitcoin has posted its worst streak in about a month as fanfare cools over the new exchange-traded funds. Now, the approval of Bitcoin ETFs last week by U.S. regulators was, of course, seen as a landmark moment for crypto, broadening access on Wall Street and beyond. Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by Alesia Haas, the Chief Financial Officer of Coinbase, a cryptocurrency exchange company. Alesia, thank you for joining us. I mean,
thanks for having
everyone
me.
was talking about ETFs and Bitcoin last week. It was quite exciting to see it approved, although the SEC said, look, this is not a value judgment, the fact that it's approved. Do you see momentum from this being quite a game changer?
Absolutely. This was a landmark day for crypto. This really brings Bitcoin into a much broader investable asset class for trillions of dollars of assets. Previously, RIAs, many wealth managers, pensions couldn't access spot crypto, and this gives them a vehicle, gives them a very familiar wrapper that they can now access through the traditional securities markets. So we think this is a wonderful step forward, bringing crypto to mainstream and bringing our goal of bringing crypto to 1 billion people around the world.
So, Alesia, have you seen an uplift? Have you seen momentum from last week? Have you had extra
We've definitely seen dollars flow into the ETFs. What I'm so proud of is the markets have been stable, though. This was a long-anticipated transition, and we're starting to see the gradual growth that we expected.
What does it mean for hiring, for example? Are you hiring more people? If you look at Coinbase in the next 12 months, where are you hiring and to what purpose?
You know, we have been really happy with our headcount over the last year. We are being incredibly efficient. What we saw last year is we brought our costs down meaningfully, but our product expansion grew tremendously. We introduced Base, a layer 2 blockchain. We grew derivatives, both in the US and outside the US. We introduced an international exchange, and we launched in many countries around the world. So we are seeing growth and efficiency. We're going to be adding headcount in 2024, but it will be all in pursuit of our roadmap. So growing internationally, continuing to expand to our retail and our institutional customers.
Any regions particular that you're looking at? Are you, for example, moving some of your US-based employees outside the US elsewhere?
No, this will be net new hiring in new local markets.
Okay, what are you most excited about in the next 12 months? You know, crypto and exchanges have had a bit of a wild ride over the last 18 months. Are you expecting stability, or are you still kind of on the lookout?
It is so important to zoom out when you look at crypto. So I've been at crypto for 6 years. Coinbase has been here for over 12 years. We've had quarters and months that were up. We've had months that were down. But when you zoom out, we've had this really nice upward trajectory over time. Growth in users, growth in products, growth in countries, assets, crypto market cap, but it's on a long-term basis. We are investors for the long term. So what I'm excited about for the next 24 months is just continuing to roll out products to our customers. We're looking to really grow our institutional product offering. We're looking to expand internationally. And I think we're going to see a lot of activity on our layer 2 solutions. So it's going to be a good year.
When you say expand internationally, is it Asia? Is there a region that actually has embraced and will continue to embrace crypto with more open arms?
Just last week we introduced a partnership with Yellow Card where we're expanding into Africa. We're going to bring stable coins to the local market. We're seeing a lot of daily use cases around payment activity, which we're really excited about. But this year we launched, or 2023 I should say, we launched in Canada, we launched in Brazil, Singapore, and we're looking to really make steady growth in those markets that we're in.
So, Alesia, I think you've actually launched an international exchange, right, since December.
Absolutely.
I think it was early December. Can you give us an idea, again, of numbers, of flows, of how exciting that is?
We can't talk about numbers quite yet. We'll be introducing earnings in February, but we're starting to see good traction on the international exchange, which is opening up to a long tail of countries for access to the spot and derivatives markets.
Can you give us a glimpse into what else you have in store for us in 2024 in terms of new products?
2023 was a big year because we announced asset management for the first time. We announced derivatives. We have many new products that just got launched that we're now looking to grow. So I don't expect 2024 to be a big announcement around products. I expect us to see expansion and growth in many of our existing products, but we've just got a toehold in.
Okay, so this is your first Davos. What are you most excited about? You have like a million meetings.
We do. What I'm really excited about is Davos will really help us with our Go Broad and Grow Deep international strategy. There's many global leaders here. There's an opportunity to talk about crypto regulation. There's an opportunity to talk about how crypto will really benefit their users and their markets, and how Coinbase is a trusted counterparty, and how we bring a different brand to the markets. And so we're really looking forward to the meetings that we have on the schedule.
I mean, broadly, regulators, and I know they're different, from country to country, but do they understand a little bit better of what crypto is?
I would say that we're learning every single month and every single quarter, and the education that we have today is tremendous compared to a year ago, 2 years ago. So yes, and I think they're starting to see the differentiated between trusted and non-trusted brands, and trust really plays into the Davos theme this year as well, which I'm excited about bringing Coinbase's brand to that market.
Who do you think is a regulator that gets it most? I don't know if there's one.
Well, there's not one in particular, but what you see is now 80% of the G20 countries have crypto regulation. So MiCA is a great example in Europe. We announced that we were putting our MiCA hub in Ireland. And MiCA is a great regulation that's custom to crypto. But you see that in Japan, you see that in Singapore, you see that in many countries around the world, big financial centers. And so we're optimistic the US jumps into this and gets this right, but we're definitely seeing a lot of thoughtful regulation in many countries.
Alesia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Good first Davos. Alesia Haas there, the Chief Financial Officer of Coinbase. Now, much more still ahead from Davos, including interviews with the Bundesbank President Joachim Nagel. We'll be speaking to Nicolai Tangen, the Chief Executive of the Norwegian Wealth Fund. And of course, we'll also speak exclusively to the Chief Executive of the Qatar Investment Authority. He's Mansour Al Mahmoud, and it's just day one. Up next, we'll have a full roundup of your markets. Again, if you look at the number of participants here in Davos, it's pretty extraordinary. I think we have 800 chief executives. We have also a number of financial or state operators that have come here to talk about not only climate change, artificial intelligence, left, right, and center, and then we have, of course, geopolitics that will also be dealt with, as Alesia was saying, on this idea of trust. Up next, Bloomberg Markets with Danny Berger in London, and this is Bloomberg.